Exodus 19:2. For they had departed from Rephidim, had come to the wilderness of Sinai, so Israel camped there before the mountain. Since we began our journey from Egypt, we have seen all the evidence that we've presented from each episode in the Exodus has been pointing us to the land of Midian, and the holy mountain being somewhere in this wilderness. Today, all Arabs point to one mountain that is higher than any other in elevation in this region. They call this peak Jabal Musa, or the Mountain of Moses. Jabal Musa is known today on Saudi Arabian maps as Jabal el-Lawz. But does it fit the description according to descriptions in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy? The answer is a striking yes, not only in description, but also in the evidence, and it is overwhelming. The traditional site of Mount Sinai, being on the Sinai Peninsula, only dates as far back as the 4th century AD. Research based on Jewish, Christian, and Islamic sources indicate a tradition that is 600 years older, and that tradition places Mount Sinai in northwest Saudi Arabia, precisely where we are in this study. As we approach Jabal el-Lawz, we immediately notice something quite peculiar. There is a distinguishing feature. There's a blackened top that we don't see on the other peaks. Why would that be? Exodus 19:18. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace. So if it appears to be darkened from a distance, could we actually ascend it to its peak and examine it more closely? Let's take a trip up there now. Scientists have stated that this darkened surface appears to have been superheated, but only accept that this metamorphic rock could have only become darkened by volcanic activity. Of course, they could only provide such an explanation, but it is assuring to know that they admit it was due to intense heat or fire. But why only the top of this peak only? Deuteronomy 4:11. Then you came near and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire to the midst of heaven. The scriptures indeed gets it right that it was fire. Now, if it was from underground volcanic activity, that blackened material at the peak would run deep. The Bible tells us that God descended it in fire, so we would expect only the surface to be burnt to an extent. Is this what we'd find? Take a look at this. It's not easy for any researchers to gain access to the base of this mountain in order to investigate. For those lucky enough to even get visas into Saudi Arabia, getting anywhere near the base of this mountain is very difficult. It is highly protected by Saudi officials. Special permits need to be issued to visit the place, and if you're lucky enough to even get one, local Bedouins or Arabs will dismiss the permit and chase you away. This has happened to many of the researchers that have attempted to visit over the years. However, images and videos slowly began leaking to the outside world from a number of trespassing researchers. They all document the exact same images. The government has fenced off key areas, but a few reputable researchers were able to sneak up to the site and gain a ton of incredible evidence, which we are about to share. Exodus 32:4. And he received the gold from their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, and made a golden calf. And they said, These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. The incident with the golden calf is a major account. The people continued to backslide to their pagan beliefs, and chose to worship the image of a calf or bull. The key word here is image. While Moses was on the mountain for extended periods, they had the idol made and would be expected to create images of this god. Inside the prohibited area that is fenced, there is an outcrop of very large stones. Upon closer examination, they have found numerous inscriptions of bulls. They also inscribed groups of people that appear to be worshipping. 32:4 states that in plural, These be thy gods, O Israel. So it makes sense that we would see many petroglyphs depicting cows. Verse 5 states, this was an altar dedicated to the idol. The top of these rocks standing together does in fact appear to be an altar with a flattened top, which the idol was likely standing on top of. When Moses comes down, he is furious to find them worshiping this golden idol. Verse 20 states, Then he took the calf, burned it in the fire, and ground it to powder. On the top of one of these rocks of the altar, there is a circular indentation where the rock was worn down. It is speculated that this is where Moses grounded the calf into powder. It would make sense because it was right there. The local tradition of this site as the Golden Calf Altar is so strong that if you've been seen approaching it, you'll be suspected of searching for gold. After the Golden Calf incident, 3,000 people were killed for worshipping this pagan god. Although this could be the goddess Hathor according to what we've uncovered back in episode 11. Nevertheless, if there were 3,000 killed, we would expect to find a burial site somewhere not too far away from the encampment in the valley. Roughly 5 kilometers from the encampment was found a burial site where every grave was dug at once. The size of the site appears to accommodate a similar number of people, although it is difficult to say how many precisely. It makes perfect sense that they would have buried these people this safe distance from their encampment. On top of that, the Saudi authorities have a sign here identifying it as an archaeological site, and it is patrolled by police. Just another confirmation of the Exodus account. And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Exodus 24:4. It records that Moses built an altar along with 12 pillars near the foot of the mountain using uncut stone. Verses 5 and 6 go on to reveal that this altar is connected to burnt offerings and peace offerings of oxen, where oxen in plural would be herded together for slaughter to sacrifice to God. Therefore, we should see a corral system made of stone nearby a series of 12 pillars. We now have confirmation of this ancient corral system set in place precisely where it should be. There are 2 parallel chutes with a 45-degree bend at the center. The width of each chute is just the right dimension for oxen to stand in single file 2 by 2s. Each chute leads to what could easily be seen as a slaughter platform. Under this platform has been found remains of bones belonging to oxen. And found just inside the bend of the corral are a number of cut stone in circular form scattered about. Decades earlier, researcher Ron Wyatt was here, and he documented many of these stones were still standing one atop another, and, although not all intact, there were 3 columns of 4 rows of pillars that stood here, 12 in total. It was also clear at that time that there was a stone platform that they stood on. The Bible says that a brook flowed from the mountain and down past the altar. Historically, a water source would be necessary for blood sacrifices to be made. There should also be the same brook to flow past the golden calf altar as well, as it states that Moses threw the golden powder into the water where the people drink. By taking bird's eye view of this entire area, it is very easy to see that a brook would have flowed through here at one time. There is even some stone retaining walls that were built for easier access to drinking water. This is strong evidence that a large population had lived here. While we're here, it is extremely important to note that many years later, in 1 Kings 19, we see that Elijah flees from Beersheba to the mountain of God and stayed in a cave here in verse 9. Could there be a cave somewhere at this mountain? It would have to be accessible, safe from passers-by in the valley, and suitable for sleeping inside. Indeed, there is just one cave that fits this criteria halfway up an adjacent peak at Jebel el-Lawz. It is about 15 feet high, 20 feet long, and 20 feet deep. It is clear that all the evidence that would have to be found to prove that this site is the site of Mount Sinai is all here laid out in this presentation. Roughly 3,400 years ago, the Israelites were encamped here at the base of the Holy Mountain, where God instructed His people and provided the 10 Commandments on stone, and prepared His people to be a God-fearing nation. One final piece of evidence we wish to address here. It was during this period that God instructed Moses and the priestly artisans to prepare a tabernacle, along with the articles for this tabernacle. Exodus 37 displays the making of the Ark of the Covenant according to God's divine instruction on how it was made. It includes the precise dimensions with overlaid gold, the mercy seat with 2 cherubim or winged birds, and the outer wings for the poles to transport it. Did the ark really exist? The following model has been created according to the exact specifications provided in Exodus. If you were to approach the Holy Tabernacle at that time, as you neared the entrance, you would have come to a screen 7 meters high. According to ancient Jewish sources, the screen was decorated with winged lions or griffins, figures usually associated with ancient Greece. Only priests were inside the courtyard, and here there was a 4.5-meter altar for sacrificial offering. During the ritual, priests carried or led an animal up the ramp. Then, the blood of the sacrifice anointed the horns of the altar. Now, at the back of the courtyard was the Holy Tabernacle, the house of God. Only Moses, his brother Aaron, and Aaron's sons entered it. Here, beyond another tapestry embroidered with griffins, are the holy furnishings. The menorah lampstand, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. And at the very back of the tabernacle is the Holy of Holies. In it, there is only one object, the ultimate holy furnishing, the Ark of the Covenant. No one today really knows what the Ark of the Covenant looked like. According to Exodus 25, the Ark was designed by God Himself to house the Ten Commandments. It would have been quite an exquisite work of craftsmanship and beauty. The Bible says that the tribe of Dan helped to craft the golden ark. Is it a coincidence that the ancient Greek writer Homer, author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, writes that the people buried at Mycenae, of which the tombstones we spoke about in the previous episode, were called the Danoi? Among some of the golden objects of which the tombstones we spoke about in the Red Sea crossing episode were called the Danoi. Among some of the golden objects found inside the tombs at Mycenae was what experts believe to be a surprising find. Inside the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, Greece, are a number of these golden objects. Among them is a series of golden images of the Ark of the Covenant, created by the same Danites who actually crafted the Ark. These images are mostly unnoticed and unheralded by visitors to the museum, as they don't seem to appear as the Ark as we see it normally illustrated. Many believe it to be the image of a single object. However, we may have unlocked a mystery of the image that is actually a representation of three objects viewed head-on. Here, we can clearly see the ramp and the sacrificial altar and the Ark of the Covenant. Perhaps at last, we may be looking at what the Ark of the Covenant looked like. It may just be the image of what Moses and the high priest saw when looking from the Holy of Holies. It may just be the vantage point of what Moses and the high priest saw when looking from the Holy of Holies and looking out towards the outer sanctuary. Join me next time as we see the Israelites enter the Promised Land and begin their campaign in their conquest of Canaan and take on the walled city of Jericho. Here on Evidence Uncovered.